just on the A30 driving back to Redruth, near where I live. And I'm thinking about space again, or places. I made a video a couple of weeks ago called the non-place of YouTube, and talking about how, you know, some places have what Marc Augier calls anthropology to them, and other places don't. Some places are just places of transience, where, you know, people don't accumulate memories, any of those kind of things. Whereas other places absolutely do accumulate memories. And we think of those as places, particularly something like one's own home, you know. I mean, home is very different to house, isn't it? This is my house, this is my home. These are different ideas. Because a house is just a building, whereas a home captures that sense of human occupation and of all the things that have happened in there. As I say, I was borrowing from Marc Augier a book he wrote called Non-Places, and speculating then that YouTube was a kind of non-place, or was a place which was harder to make into a kind of anthropological place. That was possible, but difficult. What I'm thinking about now is, and this, I'm not sure if I can fold this into a conversation about YouTube, or whether I want to, but I'm thinking about it's a really dodgy word, this, but I'll give it a go. I'm thinking about what I'm thinking of as cosmological places. So there's non-places, which Marc Augier talks about, transient spaces, no memory. There's anthropological places, which are places of human habitation that do acquire memories. And then what I'm choosing to call cosmological places. And these are places which don't just have relatively short-term human memories and human occupations attached to them the way that your home does, but probably has much, much longer-term occupation by humans, maybe occupation by other animals, and perhaps which is also a site which is cosmologically significant, or at least astronomically significant, or geologically or geographically at least significant. So, for example, you know, this is an example which will turn some people off, so I apologise about this, but some churches are like this. You know, I've looked around quite a few churches, and I'm quite interested in church architecture. And if you go to a really old church, you know, quite apart from the religious trappings that are associated with it, it's also got a real grounding, not just in an anthropological history, the history of the people who have, you know, the recent occupation by human beings, but certainly in the UK here, some of those churches are centuries and centuries old. You know, I was in one earlier on today, a chapel earlier on today, which dates back to the 4th century. The 4th century. You know, that's 1600 years, 1700 years. That's human occupation on a massive scale. And it's a kind of human occupation which is larger than just the kind of local human occupation of my culture. You know, that's seen a whole rack of different cultures pass through it, different kinds of religious and spiritual practices taking place within the walls of this particular chapel. So it's an anthropological place, but the kinds of anthropology that it occupies are not just ones associated with me and my local culture, they're ones which have a longer history. And the fact that it's a chapel means that it's also built in a particular place. I mean, this particular chapel I'm thinking of was built on the site of a well, a particular well. So it's kind of in lockstep with geological formations. You know, where the water table is, where water rises to the surface through the rocks that are there, how the water flows through it, because the water actually flows through the chapel itself. You know, it's built into the fabric of the geology and the geography of the environment. And also, of course, because it's a chapel, it's a Christian religious building, partially Christian at least. It's also got pagan associations. But because of the Christian thing, part of it is oriented toward the east. And the east is not just a local geographical feature. East is a feature on the map. A map of the world. It's a global feature. to do with how this planet we are on spins in space, to do with the alignment of the magnetic fields on that planet perhaps, certainly to do with the way that continents are arrayed across the planetary surface. It's massive, you know, it's a massively rich system that's being tapped into. And this particular chapter, as I say, as well as the kind of local anthropology, the long distance anthropology, the geographical and the global orientations that it's being tapped into, it's also a chapel in which the solstices are celebrated. You get a lot of pagans going up there at various different times of the year, and if you go in the following day, there's all kinds of stuff around the place from whatever ceremonies were taking place the night before. And you know that those things are being on for donkey's years. And solstices are about the sun and the moon. These are solar and lunar occasions to do with the positions of these massive planetary bodies in space. Now, I'm not attributing any weird astrological thing to that. You don't need to. All I'm saying is that the anthropology of the space, in both its short and long term, is overlaid and made to intersect with these other massive geographical, geological, global, and literally astronomical systems. So in terms of a place, that's got a lot of stuff going through it, you know. It's far more than just the places, the anthropological places that Marc Auger talks about. These are, there's a cosmology, and again, I'm not attributing any kind of mythical or mystical or any of those trappings to it, but just the facts of the matter means that, you know, these things coincide, and it's hard not to feel that when you go into those places, and there's no reason to resist feeling it, of course. You know, you do feel like you're in a place which has the significance attached to places in which lots of patterns overlap. That's all I've got to say. Other than, you know, that's something that's quite hard to find these days. It's hard to find in the built environment of day-to-day life. You know, our cities are not really built anywhere special. They're not oriented anywhere special. They might be built on lowest bridging points or on coastlines where particular shipping lanes pass through. There might be some kind of thing like that, but generally there's no larger significance, and they're very transient. So by cosmological standards, even the most richly anthropological space that we can find these days in our cities and our day-to-day lives is relatively non-place in Marc Auger's terms. And if you go to a place like YouTube, an online environment, a site, now look, listen to all the spatial metaphors that are being played out here: site, space, place, location, address. You know, if you go to a place like YouTube, it's hard enough making it to an anthropological place to give it a sense of human occupation, but I don't know how you go about giving it any of those trappings of cosmological place. You know, where in the world is YouTube? Which way is it facing? How does it relate to the orientation of the sun, or the spin of the earth, or the rising of the moon? I'm not saying it has to, but it's something I find interesting as I drive on the A30 home. Speak to you soon. Bye.